Settle into a comfortable chair, breathe deeply, and allow your mind to drift back to the closing years of the 19th century. Our story opens in Braunau am Inn, sleepy Austrian town perched on the banks of the Inn River. Picture a place where time seems to slow, where narrow cobblestone streets wind between pastel-colored houses with green shutters, and the gentle murmur of the river mixes with the scent of freshly baked bread from the village bakery. It's April 20th, 1889. Here, in a modest house on the corner of a quiet street, amidst the soft glow of an oil lamp, a young couple, Alois and Clara Hitler, prepares for the arrival of their first child. Morning at the Hitler home. You awake to the sharp ring of a brass bell. In the dusky kitchen, a single oil lamp glows beneath the wooden beams that crisscross the ceiling. Alois Hitler, Adolf's father, sits at the table, shaving. His face, lined and weathered, reflects the harsh realities of his trade as a customs official. A newspaper lies unfolded before him, the morning headlines detailing the latest imperial decrees from Vienna. Opposite, Alois is Clara, his gentle wife. Her hands are always soft, her voice low and soothing. She guides young Adolf to his seat, smoothing the collar of his shirt. You can almost feel the warmth of her touch, the tenderness in her eyes, and you sense a fierce devotion in her eyes, she who will shape the early chapters of her son's life. After breakfast, Alois dispatches Adolf to chores, stacking neatly cut logs in the backyard, feeding the chickens, sweeping the courtyard until every pebble lies exposed. Fail to finish, and you feel the sting of his reprimand. Though he means well, Alois struggles to connect with his headstrong boy, often resorting to harsh words and swift punishments. But by midday, Clara calls her son to collect wildflowers from a nearby meadow. Imagine him skipping along the path, a checkered handkerchief tied to his stick, gathering colorful blossoms that will brighten the house later. You picture him pressing them carefully between pages of an old ledger, Trophies of Innocence. When evening shadows stretch long across the kitchen table, Adolf reads aloud from his reader, his voice echoing in the stillness. Clara listens patiently, occasionally touching his unruly hair. Alois, ever the pragmatist, nods approvingly when his son finishes. An unexpected silence descends. Adolf, sensing it, asks if they can light the lamp, chasing away the gloom. Soon, the three are gathered in the lamplight, sharing stories. Perhaps Adolf listens, wide-eyed, as Clara describes the enchanting Christmas markets of Vienna, or how she once saw the emperor riding through Braunau in a golden carriage. The days turn into weeks, the weeks into months. And you watch Adolf grow, a curious, inquisitive boy, asking endless questions about the world around him. One day a traveling peddler enters the Hitler's home and begins regaling the family with tales of faraway lands, describing bustling marketplaces, snow-capped mountains, and the Eiffel Tower in Paris. Adolf listens, utterly captivated. As the peddler packs up to leave, he notices the keen look in the boy's eye. He pulls out a postcard depicting a magnificent alpine panorama and hands it to Adolf, encouraging him to pursue his dreams. Schoolboy rebellions. Then comes the day when Adolf, a bit older now, walks through the heavy oak doors of Lambach Primary. The room is Spartan, the only splashes of color coming from the children's clothes and the Frau Zimmer's floral shawl. Wooden desks are bolted to the floor, each holding a slate and a handful of pencils. At the front of the class, a stern Fraulein holds a pointer like a scepter, commanding attention with sharp eyes and a shrill voice. The lessons begin. The Fräulein paces before the blackboard, writing Latin declensions and German verbs. You try to follow along, committing sums, rules, vocabulary to memory. Occasionally, the Fräulein singles you out, asking you to translate a phrase or write out a rule. Your heart pounds. With each question, you feel the weight of all eyes upon you. Will you stumble? Will you disappoint them? The bell finally rings, offering sweet respite. You burst out of the schoolhouse, racing down the street, breathing deeply, savoring the taste of freedom. During recess, you race across the playground, kicking a football with other boys, laughing as you dodge and weave. Back in the classroom, though, order and routine are reestablished. The girls sit demurely, the boys disciplined. And you obediently write lines on your slate until the bell ushers in another precious break. Later, secondary school in Linz brings Latin declensions and Goethe's poetry. You underline passages about heroism, yet you find yourself doodling in the margins, sketching the soaring spire of the Linz Cathedral, dreaming of becoming an artist. The halls of Vienna, heartbreak and resolve. In 1907, at age 17, you step off a train in Vienna, a city that pulses with energy. Trams rattle over cobblestones, cafes hum with conversation. Artists in berets discuss the latest art movements. Excited and nervous, you walk toward the Kunstgewerbe, the Academy of Fine Arts, heart pounding with hope. You wander the grand halls adorned with classical sculptures and paintings of stern-faced masters. What will they think of your work? Inside the studio, you set up your easel and begin painting, pouring all your passion, all your dreams into the canvas. Days turn into weeks, each stroke of the brush bringing new challenges, new triumphs. Yet when the instructors critique your work, you shrink under their sharp words. They praise other students, their watercolors, their oils, everything except yours. Finally, the fateful day arrives. You stand before your masterpiece, a cityscape of Vienna, and wait for the verdict. But instead of praise, you hear mocking laughter. They rip apart your work, shattering your confidence. Disheartened, you wander the streets of Vienna, clutching your precious work that now feels worthless. You imagine yourself walking along the Corner Strage, passing elegant shops with glowing display windows. The enticing aromas of coffee and pastries wafting out onto the sidewalk. You pause, debating whether to enter a cafe and order a small cup of coffee. The dream of becoming an artist rejected, you find yourself sleeping in a cheap hostel in Leopoldstadt, the former Jewish quarter. Dreams deferred and nights in a dingy hostel can wear heavily on the soul, can't they? You huddle under a threadbare blanket, the room's dim oil lamp casting long shadows that dance on the walls. Rain drums a steady tattoo against the window pane, a melancholic counterpoint to the snores of the men around you. Days pass, each one blurring into the next in a haze of menial jobs and aimless wandering. You might find yourself working as a day laborer, hauling bricks or digging ditches under the hot summer sun. By nightfall, exhaustion settles deep in your bones. Where do you go then? The same dingy hostel, the only refuge this weary traveler can afford. In these dark hours, you might pour out your frustrations onto paper, penning angry poems or biting satirical pieces. Yet even as despair threatens to engulf you, flickers of resolve remain. You recall the peddler's words, "Go for your dreams." And you wonder if there's another academy, another city where your talent might be recognized. This could be your moment, your chance to tell your tale to the world. So won't you share it with us? What direction does Adolf's story take? How do his dreams evolve in the face of rejection? Or perhaps you have another tale to tell. Share your story in the comments below. Together, we can weave these historical threads into a tapestry of shared imagination, ensuring that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit shines through. Remember, history isn't just dates and battles. It's a canvas upon which humanity paints its story. And you, dear viewer, are an integral part of that canvas. So keep watching, keep thinking, and above all, keep imagining. Until next time, keep living the history. In the heart of Vienna, amidst the majestic backdrop of St. Stephen's Cathedral, the hunger-stricken artist found solace in painting panoramic views of the majestic Hofburg and the Riesenrad. Postcard images of these iconic landmarks became his lifeline, each one a small step away from hunger and rejection. He retreated into Vienna's cozy coffeehouses, where amidst the curling cigarette smoke, he devoured fiery pamphlets on social Darwinism, pan-German nationalism, and anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. These radical ideas took root in a mind already fermenting with discontent and dreams of a bygone era. By 1913, his funds were exhausted and his patience worn thin. He left Vienna and returned briefly to Linz, then crossed the Bavarian border to Munich. There he found a city bathed in the fresh air of the Alps, where the streets echoed with the marches of cadets and armories were at every corner. The uniform called to him like a siren song, promising a sense of belonging and purpose that eluded him as a poverty-stricken artist. So it was that Hitler, the struggling painter, began his transformation into a soldier, a pawn in the game of ideologies and ambitions that would soon engulf Europe in flames. In Munich, he found work painting for a postcard publisher near Marienplatz, where he depicted fairy tale castles and mystical woodlands. Each successful painting yielded a few pfennigs, enough for a crust of bread and a mug of beer. But as he stood there, the clink of mugs and the rumble of soldiers in parade, he sensed the drumbeat of history and felt that his moment, whatever it was finally coming. Join us next time as we continue to chronicle the tumultuous journey through the life of Adolf Hitler, the man who would become the most infamous dictator in history. If you want to know more about this channel and our future content, stay tuned. The Great War Soldier and Survivor, 1914 to 1918. 1. To the front lines. Late August 1914, Munich buzzes with patriotic fervor. As you make your way through the crowded Marienplatz, the air vibrates with excitement. The brass band of the Reserve Infantry Regiment 16 plays rousing German folk tunes. Their music mingles with the shouts of street vendors selling flags and patriotic songs. Red, white, and blue banners flutter from every balcony. The square in front of the News Rathos, or new town hall, ripples with people. Many are veterans of the army, resplendent in their picked-up uniforms. Others, like yourself, are volunteers, eager to join the fight. You want to be part of this surge of German patriotism. Soon you will be a cog in the well-oiled military machine. After registering with the Royal Bavarian Reserve Infantry Regiment 16, you receive your uniform, a stiff dark blue woolen tunic and matching straight-legged breeches. But it is the rifle that weighs most heavily in your hands. Its cold barrel seems to hum with latent power. This Mauser, one of the finest weapons in the world, is now your constant companion. With your equipment slung over your shoulder, you fall into step beside hundreds of other raw recruits. Following the sergeant major, you march to the cattle car that will take you to the front lines. The train rumbles through rolling fields dotted with grazing cattle and gurgling streams. Inside the cattle car, the air is thick with the smell of sweat and urine. Wounded veterans clutch crumpled letters in their laps. You see nurses wheeling stretchers past, their faces grim. After several days of jostling travel, you reach Ypres in Belgium. There thousands of German troops have dug into a vast trench network that stretches as far as the eye can see. Carved into the churned earth, the trenches rise and fall in a seemingly endless ribbon. From the road, you cannot hear the steady drip of water or the ceaseless rumble of artillery fire. But once you descend into the trench, these sounds become your new reality. Wading through thick, sucking mud, you climb onto narrow duckboards that crisscross the trench bottom. The ground shudders beneath your feet. Overhead, the rotten wooden trench roof beams sag under the weight of churned earth. Rain sluices down the trench walls, mixing with mud that climbs halfway to your knees. Slithering along slick planks, you pass abandoned steel helmets, shattered by incoming fire and splintered by artillery. The helmet catches your eye. It looks much too new to belong to someone who has fallen. You push the thought away and continue on. Everywhere the stench of cordite and decay hangs thick. From time to time, the distant rumble of incoming shells reaches your ears. Sometimes they land nearby, spraying mud and dirt into the air. Other times they detonate further off, shaking the ground and sending tremors up your legs. The danger feels both remote and imminent. Then the whistle shrieks, summoning you to the top of the trench. 2. Daily grind and fragile camaraderie. The trench routine is unrelenting. For 3 days you stand watch at the soggy trench parapet, peering out at no man's land. When not on guard duty, you huddle in a dank barn. Crouching beside an oil lamp, you sip weak coffee and try to ignore the biting flies. Sleep comes fitfully, haunted by nightmares of fire and screams. Every day you brace for the whistle's shriek. Then it is time to charge across the barren expanse of churned earth and shattered trees. This is no man's land, a buffer zone between the opposing trenches. Rushing over the top, you drop flat to minimize your target. The ground shudders around you as incoming shells explode. Machine guns zip bullets past, ripping sod from the ground. Barbed wire snarls at your feet. Keeping your head down, you crawl forward, desperate to reach the enemy trench. But the advance is nearly impossible. Artillery barrages pulverize the landscape. Explosions rock the ground, throwing clods of mud and shrapnel into the air. The thin protective screen of branches protecting your position offers little cover. You dive behind a tree, pressing your body against its rough bark. Glancing back, you see the enemy artillerists, their guns pointed directly at your position. The bombardment will not stop. With each explosion, more men are lost. You look for Corporal Weber, your squad leader, but he has vanished from sight. Maybe you reached the enemy trench. Maybe he was wounded or killed. You do not know, and you are afraid to find out. Then the whistle blows again, summoning you back to safety. Scrambling back to your trench, you collapse on the muddy ground, your uniform caked in mud. You strip off your boots, revealing socks caked in clay. It is hard to remember when you last felt clean. You shiver, not from the rain or the wind, but from exhaustion and dread. With a sigh, you pull on dry socks and wait for your turn to wash in the communal trench basin. Looking down at the mud caked on your hands, you think of home. You wonder what the gardens look like now, whether the roses have stopped blooming, and your mother is right. Why did you come here? Over the next few weeks, you grow accustomed to the daily grind. For 3 days, you work tirelessly on the fortifications, hauling buckets of water to drench sandbags and tamp down the sides of the trench. For 3 days off, you stand guard, gripping your rifle until your shoulders ache. But even in this desolate place, you forge bonds with your comrades. On rare occasions, when officers are not watching, you share a flask of schnapps with Corporal Weber and smoke his thin cigarettes. He tells stories of the old days, before the war, when the two of you celebrated your friend Franz's birthday in a Munich beer hall. Franz, who is dead now, lies somewhere in Belgium. You listen to Weber's stories and think of your own life before the war. You recall evenings spent playing cards with your father and brothers, the warm bread and cabbage your mother set on the table. Your life then seems like a half-forgotten dream. In the fragile lulls between battles, you and Weber exchange postcards with your families. His wife Greta sends him a picture of a store carrying a babe aloft. She writes of her hope to see her husband soon. Your postcard shows a stern-faced Kaiser Wilhelm. On the back, your mother's spidery handwriting says she is praying for your safe return. But you know that no amount of prayer or luck can keep you alive in this place. One night, as the sky is filled with exploding shells, you write a letter of your own. Clutching the precious sheet of paper, you scratch out the words by the dim light of an oil lamp. You tell your mother about the friends you have made and the heroic deeds you have witnessed. But you cannot bring yourself to say how close you are to death. In the end, you write only of your hopes to see her again soon. Folding the letter carefully, you seal it with wax and address it to your mother. Finding an officer, you ask him to send the letter home. He promises to see that your words reach your family. You wonder if she will get the letter at all. Wonder if you will be around to see her again. Suddenly, the dugout shudders as artillery fire rains down. The beam above you groans, threatening to collapse. You and the others dive for cover. Reaching for your rifle, you peer out of the dugout. You can see nothing but dust and smoke. Your ears ring from the explosions. The danger feels immediate and real. As always, there is little you can do but wait for it to pass. In this desolate place, surrounded by the debris of war, you wait and hope for a peace that seems increasingly distant. Click here to learn more about life in the trenches during World War I, or click here to explore our WWI resources. Are you ready to delve into the depths of World War I? This series will immerse you in the trenches and battles that defined one of history's deadliest conflicts. Each episode is like a small story, but together they form a gripping narrative of courage, loss, and resilience during one of the darkest chapters of human history. And today we'll take you through 7 moments in World War I that will make you say, "I can't believe they actually did that." No. 1. Into the lion's den. The charge of the 2nd Lancers, November 1914. On the rolling hills of Flanders, a cold wind whips across the battlefield. You are a member of the 2nd Lancers, your horse pawing the frozen ground. Suddenly, a wave of German infantry charges across no man's land, their bayonets glinting in the morning sun. Your lance is fixed, the battle cry echoing your own. You ride toward the enemy. Cannons roar, rifles crack, and the air fills with the shouts of men and the screams of horses. You javelin forward, the impact of your charge sending the enemy reeling. But this is only the beginning. What follows is a brutal melee of flashing steel and desperate struggles. As you hack and slash, you find yourself amidst a maelstrom of dust and blood. The fate of the day hangs in the balance as you fight tooth and nail to break through the enemy lines. And when the dust finally settles, the full extent of the carnage becomes clear. The ground is littered with fallen soldiers and horses, and the cries of the wounded fill the air. Despite the heavy losses, your charge has broken the enemy's defenses, allowing your comrades to push forward. You stand amidst the wreckage, exhausted but exhilarated, knowing that you have played a part in one of the most daring charges of the war. No. 2. Acts of Valor and the Iron Cross. December 1914. A pivotal moment arrives. A desperate dispatch must reach command under heavy fire. You volunteer, your heart pounding as you crawl beneath whistling shells. Every nerve screams, yet you deliver the message. Back at headquarters, an officer pins the Iron Cross Second Class on your chest. Its weight is proud and hollow, for you remember the friend left behind in the mud. For the unseen terror, gas warfare. Spring 1918 introduces chlorine gas. Before dawn, a greenish cloud drifts over your trench. You gag, lungs tearing as men cough and collapse. Fumbling with your gas mask straps, you secure it just in time. The world mutates into muffled chaos figures, stumbling, limbs flailing. You cling to your rifle, heart racing, breathing through rubber valves. The gas's sting lingers for days, a reminder that death can be as silent as a whisper. 5. Wounded and withdrawn. Later that year, a shell fragment tears into your calf. The blast hurls you to the ground. You taste copper and feel white-hot pain. Comrades drag you to a duckboard path, each step sending shock through bone. You arrive at a field hospital tents lined with cots, nurses in crisp aprons moving with calm purpose. A medic sprays iodine, the burns searing but cleansing. You drift in and out of consciousness, the distant roar of artillery fading into uneasy dreams. 6. Race to the Sea. The Battle of the Lys. April 1918. A German offensive threatens to break through the weakened Allied lines. The order is given: retreat to the sea or face encirclement. You race along with thousands of others, the weight of knapsack-heavy boots churning up the muddy road. The air grows thick with tension. Suddenly, a shell explodes overhead, sending shrapnel whistling through the trees. Adrenaline surges as you dive for cover. But there is no time to waste. The Germans are close. Turning, you flee, the chilling echo of artillery fire spurring you onward. The safety of the sea seems a distant dream as the relentless barrage thunders in your ears. Will you and your comrades make it to the coast in time, or will you be caught in the grip of the advancing enemy? 7. Requiem for the Fallen. November 11th, 1918, the guns fall silent. The fighting has stopped after 4 years of bloody conflict. You stand amidst the ruins of what was once a bustling landscape. The air is heavy with the scent of decay as you survey the scarred terrain. The victory is a hollow one. For every step you take, there is the ever-present reminder of the cost of war. As you lay down the wreath, your thoughts drift to those who will never return. The true cost of victory is measured not in territory gained, but in the lives forever lost. There are many more stories waiting to be discovered in the depths of World War I, and if you haven't already, be sure to check out our other videos about the Great War. We hope you enjoyed this small glimpse into the life of a soldier. During World War I, remember, this is just one of many stories from this conflict. Stay tuned for more. And if you're ready to dive deeper into the past, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Thanks for joining us. When the armistice was signed, you might have thought it was over. The Great War, a conflict that had snared your generation since they were young men in the Kaiser's youth uniforms, was finally finished. But as the victorious Allies met in Versailles to determine the terms of peace, you know that peace is an illusion. And when you're discharged in March 1919, you return to Munich with empty pockets and a heavy heart. No triumphant hero, but a wounded veteran. You're not alone. By late 1918, more than 4 million Germans had been killed or injured. Many others were missing, presumed dead after being captured by the British and French. All bear the scars of war, not just on their bodies, but in their hearts and minds. The faces around you are haggard, haunted by memories of mud, metal, and shattered hopes. You catch their eyes, knowing they understand the weight of that look. As you pass the arching entrance to the Hauptbahnhof, a shiver runs down your spine. The iron cross on your tunic feels like a brand, searing hot shame onto your chest. For 4 years, this symbol has meant little more than paper cuts and shouting sergeants. Now it seems to accuse you of defeat. 2. A generation lost in the trenches, the air grows colder as February 1919 gives way to March. You pull your greatcoat tighter about you, while still proudly wearing your uniform. You can't shake the feeling that you're an imposter. What right do you have to that blue and white now? You trudge past shuttered shop fronts and rubble-strewn sidewalks, heading toward the familiar comfort of your family's apartment building. The chill wind whips across the square, tugging at the lapels of your uniform. Are people pointing at you? Are they whispering behind cupped hands? Do they see you as a hero or a victim? You push past the questions, unable to answer them yourself. Inside the apartment, your mother sits mending a hole in a sweater. Your father stares into the embers of the dying stove fire. Their faces are etched with worry. You know what they fear? At the front, there were enough bullets for everyone, but few whole bodies coming home. You reach out to touch your mother's arm, and she turns, her face crumpling with emotion. Her grip trembles. She holds back tears, then busies herself with her knitting, afraid to ask the questions burning on her lips. How are you? What happened? Where were you all these years? Instead, you tell them about your leg, how shrapnel nearly took it from you, or how malaria burned through your insides like a red-hot musket ball. Anything but the truth. Theirs is a story you can't bring yourself to tell. Not yet. Maybe never. The war is over, but you're still jumpy at sudden noises. A cat slinking across the street, a door slamming shut, a man's heavy tread on the stairs. Each sound brings back the horrors of battle, the dizzying staccato of incoming shells. You try to tell your family about it, but the words stick in your throat, so instead you say nothing, wandering the rooms like a ghost. Spring comes to Munich, but you remain frozen inside, unable to thaw. The lines on your face seem to deepen, your eyes haunted. Your sleep is filled with nightmares of charging figures silhouetted against a blazing sky, screaming in a language of flame and steel. You wake gasping, drenched in sweat. In the silence of the morning, you hear the echoes of that distant war. They linger in the spaces between the buildings and the cobblestones beneath your feet, in the eyes of the children. Playing hopscotch in the worn steps of the opera house, in the rustle of skirts at the corner of your vision. The war may be over, but its specter looms large, and you're not alone in this. Everywhere you go, you see the living dead. Men and women who have survived the war but come back changed, emptied out, clinging to the ghosts of yesterday. On street corners, you meet pale-eyed girls whose skirts are hiked high, bearing snaggle-toothed grins. In cafes, you sit across from old men who order another glass of beer and tell the same story, about bravery and bloodshed, boys turned beasts, men turned ghosts. Everyone is talking about the war, everyone except you. 3. Into the volcano, the scent of fresh bread mingles with the reek of stale waste in the crowded Munich streets. Summer 1919, the heat shimmers above the crowds. People jostle past, their faces flushed, voices raised. Some sport black armbands, mourning those lost in the fighting. Others clutch small red flags emblazoned with white letters. Spartacus Band. You turn away, hiding your face behind your collar. Since the armistice, things have become increasingly tense in Munich. The Spartacists, led by the charismatic Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht, advocate for a communist revolution. Their red flags are a stark reminder of the violence that erupted last November, when Spartacist rebels seized key government buildings and the postal service. For weeks, the city descended into chaos. Armed clashes erupted between communists, Free Corps, and the army. Now the streets are littered with the aftermath of those battles. Broken window panes glinting in the sun, spent bullet casings crunching underfoot, graffiti daubed on walls. You stop outside a cafe and push back the sleeve of your uniform, revealing the angry red stain of a tattoo peeking through your shirt. It's a memento of your time at the front, a silent scream of rage against the world. The words are indecipherable, meaningless, but the image seared into your arm speaks volumes. To some, your uniform is a symbol of oppression, of the old regime that plunged Germany into this economic morass. To others, it means courage, discipline, and order. For you, it's just cloth and brass buttons, heavy and confining, itchy and useless. You yearn to rip it off, throw it into the growing pile of rubble and start over as someone new, someone free. But you can't let go, not yet. Not until you find out who you are without it. The summer stretches before you, long and hot, filled with the buzz of discontent. All around you, people seem to be looking for answers. The war may be over, but the fighting has just begun. The question is, which side will you join? In the streets, the cries of bread, peace, and land mingle with the sharp retort of down with the Spartacists. You navigate the crowds, clutching your bag close, trying not to show too much interest in the fray, but the words snag in your ears. Suddenly, a group of Freikorps march past, chests heaving, eyes hard. The leader, a man with a handlebar mustache and a cruel smile, spots you. He takes a menacing step closer, eyes raking over your uniform. His gaze lingers on your arm tattoo, and you flinch instinctively. "Oh, so a soldier," he sneers, his voice dripping with contempt. "One of the men who almost ruined our country, betrayed us with their talk of honorable deaths and glorious victories." The words hit their mark, and you open your mouth to defend yourself. But before you can utter a sound, the man strides away, leaving you shaken. His words echo in your mind, twisting like a knife. "You didn't betray anyone, did you?" A new dawn in Munich, 1919. After 4 years of war, you are unemployed, hungry, angry. Germany has lost not only the war, but also any semblance of dignity. The victors at Versailles have stripped the nation bare, taken everything from food to factories. All around you, people struggle to survive in a collapsing economy, struggling under the weight of crushing reparations. And then there's the Jews, those grasping, greedy Jews. They control the banks and the press. They are the ones who really won the war. You see them smirking from behind their newspapers, holding the strings that make Germany dance. But now a new day is dawning, the day of the new Germany. You sense it in the anger that festers in your gut, an anger directed at the Jews, at the government, at France, at the entire world. It is the perfect breeding ground for a new kind of politics, the politics of hate and fear. And you are about to become its disciple. Join me on a journey back to the 1920s, where we will explore what it would have been like to join Hitler's inner circle in the turbulent days leading up to the beer hall putsch. 1. The slippery slope of indoctrination. By mid-1919, you find yourself drawn to a small gathering in a dimly lit beer hall off their Sinstrage. The speaker, draped by a swastika banner, rants against the Versailles Treaty, against Marxists, against Jewish cabals. His voice is measured, almost hypnotic. You nod along as he weaves a tale of German greatness, betrayed by enemies both within and abroad. He speaks of a nation stabbed in the back, a people enslaved by foreign powers. As he warms to his theme, the room grows hot with emotion. Around you, men clench their fists, their faces flushed with anger and beer. When the speech ends, you rise to your feet, swept up in the fervor, clapping wildly. Now, you want to join the movement, to be part of something larger than yourself. You approach the speaker afterward and introduce yourself. He smiles warmly, his eyes twinkling. "I see you are one of the new recruits," he says, handing you a pamphlet with its 25-point program. "Take this, read it carefully, and ponder its words." You accept the pamphlet, its lurid promises of national rebirth and racial purity, tucked safely into your pocket like contraband hope. 2. Propaganda and indoctrination. In the weeks following your first meeting, you find yourself drawn back to the beer hall. The speaker's words echo in your mind, resonating with a truth that cuts deep. Each time you listen, you feel a heady mix of excitement and fear course through your veins. The ideas presented in the DAP, the German Workers' Party, are like a drug, and you are quickly becoming addicted. The more you hear, the more you believe. The party's propaganda is masterful. Leaflets, posters, speeches, each one reinforcing the message of hate and fear, each one pulling you deeper into its web. The ideas of racial purity and national revival are intoxicating, promising a return to a mythical past when Germany was great. You buy a membership card, donning the brown shirt uniform with a mixture of pride and trepidation. Each meeting, each rally, each march, you become more indoctrinated, more loyal to the cause. You meet like-minded men, some older, some younger, all united by their hatred of the current state of affairs. There is camaraderie here, a sense of belonging that you have never felt before. They call themselves comrades now, and you are one of them. But there is always more work to be done, more propaganda to spread, more enemies to identify. 3. The power of oratory. In early 1920, you watched the speaker again, now calling himself Adolf Hitler, step onto a makeshift stage of barrels and crates. He is different from the other speakers. His brown jacket is simple, his boots dusty from the walk. He begins softly, recounting his wartime service with wounded pride. You lean closer, intrigued. Then, as he speaks of Germany's humiliation, his voice tightens, and he leans forward, eyes burning. This is no ordinary man. You can feel it in your gut. By the time he denounces the Treaty of Versailles, the crowd is on its feet, fists pumping the air. You feel adrenaline flood your veins. Here is a man who channels your rage and fear, who gives voice to your unspoken thoughts. You leave the rally that night feeling energized, invigorated by the power of his words. 4. The Beer Hall Putsch. November 8th, 1923. The fateful night. Stand packed inside the Burger Bruckler. Torches sputtering against smoke-stained walls. Hitler, pistol in hand, seizes the microphone. He proclaims a revolution. Outside, armed supporters, their faces grim, march through the Isar Gate toward the Feldhorn Hall, the field of heroes. You follow, heart pounding, through dim streets lined with uniformed police and nervous onlookers. A single shot cracks. Men scream and fall. You dive for cover as a firefight erupts between the Nazis and the police. Trapped in a doorway, you watch as men fall around you, their uniforms stained crimson. Adrenaline surges through your veins, mingling with fear and excitement. For a moment, time seems to stand still. Then you run, racing through the deserted streets, the taste of freedom and danger on your lips. You throw yourself into a waiting car, your lungs burning as you speed away from the scene. By dawn, the putsch collapses. You escape in a muddied overcoat, pride shattered into bitter fragments. 5. Aftermath and repression. In the wake of the failed putsch, fear and uncertainty grip Munich. The city, once a hotbed of revolutionary fervor, now cowers under the weight of the crackdown. The streets you once roamed freely now echo with the heavy tread of police boots. The familiar beer halls, once filled with the laughter of comrades, are shuttered and silent. The leaders are arrested, the party banned. You move through the city like a ghost, haunted by the memories of the past few days. Sleep eludes you, replaced by nightmares of gunfire and betrayal. You fear the knock of the police at your door, the chill of the prison cell. But as the days pass, a strange calm descends. The city begins to heal, to rebuild. Life slowly returns to normal. Yet for you, nothing will ever be the same. The ideals that once burned so brightly now flicker like a dying flame. Question everything, the party, its leaders, your own beliefs. The world you once thought black and white now seems painted in shades of gray. The friends you made, the comrades who fought and died, are they all lost to you? Forever, what will become of the movement now? Will it rise again from the ashes? You cannot say. All you know is that you must tread carefully, that every word, every action could be your undoing. You are caught in a web of fear and disillusionment, unsure of what to do next. 6. Escape to Argentina. You flee to Argentina, leaving behind the turmoil of post-war Germany. Buenos Aires welcomes you with open arms, offering a new life in a distant land. But as you walk the bustling streets, the echoes of Munich follow you. Faces in the crowd seem strangely familiar. Voices whisper of politics and power struggles. Can you truly escape the past, or will it catch up to you no matter where you go? The allure of a fresh start is strong, yet the specter of your former life looms ever present. Will you build a new future, or become trapped in the shadows of your past? Only time will tell. Your story doesn't have to end here. If you enjoyed this experience, please leave a comment below to let me know what you think. Your feedback is very important to us and helps us create more interactive and engaging historical experiences for you. Also, if you want to learn more about this period of history, check out the links in the description below for further reading and research. Thanks for joining us on this journey through time. We hope you learned something new and had fun while doing it. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more historical adventures. Until next time, keep exploring the past, and remember, history is always alive. When the gavel came down, it was more than the verdict. It was the end of the road, at least for now. They found you and Hitler guilty of treason and handed down your sentences. 5 years for him, 15 months for you. A harsh verdict, yet a dangerous calm settled upon you, a clear-eyed understanding of what lay ahead. For both of you, this was merely a pause, a breath before the storm. The cold stone of the Munich courtroom echoed with the weight of their words, the echoes following you into the harsh dawn light as they herded you toward the waiting car. As the vehicle pulled away, you caught a last glimpse of the courtroom. There, on the far side of the polished wood at the defense table, sat Hitler. His head was bent, not in defeat but in thought, a strange smile playing on his lips. What had come over him in that courtroom? The charismatic leader, the fierce debater, had been replaced by a man who seemed almost otherworldly. Was this the same man who led the failed putsch? Who was this enigmatic figure, and where was he leading you? You joined the movement because of the magnetic pull of his rhetoric, the promise of a new Germany, free from the shackles of Versailles. Yet as you were thrown into the dank, dark depths of Landsberg prison, that grand vision seemed a distant memory. The regime had swept you both into custody. The movement was scattered. But within the cold brick walls of the prison, something remarkable was happening. Hitler, sentenced to 5 years, was turning the indictment into a spectacle. His voice, amplified by the acoustics of the courtroom, had rung above the judge's gavel, holding the jury, the press, and the nation spellbound. He was weaving a tapestry of words, painting a picture of German destiny and his role in its unfolding. The real trial had been for the hearts and minds of the German people, and Hitler, with his masterful oratory, had won them over. And while the regime had intended to punish you both, they had inadvertently granted privileges, a typewriter, books, and most importantly visitors. Hitler dictated the first volume of Mein Kampf to a rapt audience, his words seeping into the very fabric of the prison walls. The book was a potent brew of resentment and grand plans, a testament to his burning ambition and twisted worldview. You read the chapters over and over, seeing in them both a political manifesto and a psychological confession. Each word was a brick in the fortress of his genius and madness. The regime had sought to silence him, but instead had given him a platform. And now they had unwittingly created a Bible for a movement that would one day shake the world. Then there was you, staring at the cold, damp walls of your tiny cell, a space so small it felt like a dog kennel. Your time inside was marked by the clanging of the cell door and the muffled sounds of the prison yard. Days bled into weeks, then months, all the while Hitler's booming voice echoing in your ears, keeping alive the spirit of the movement.
Ow.
The rigid routine of prison life left little room for thought, let alone plotting. You did what you could, writing letters to old contacts, trying to keep the movement's embers glowing until you were released. When your 15 months finally ended, the gates of the prison swung open, and you stepped out blinking into the wintry air of 1924 Munich. The city had changed in your absence. The shadow of the putsch still lingered, but the movement, well, it was something else entirely. Hitler had emerged from prison a national figure. Putsch might have been over, but the movement it inspired was just beginning. Local chapters were springing up across Germany, reaching out like grasping vines. Youth groups were formed, their members as impressionable as wax, ready to be molded into the image of the future. Rallies were held, meticulously staged affairs that combined political theater with mass pageantry. At the heart of it all stood Hitler, rebuilding the Nazi Party with the strategic patience of a chess master, planning each move. As you helped post flyers on frozen lampposts or handed out leaflets in snow-choked streets, you felt the fervor of the movement surging through you. It was a different kind of revolution from the one you'd envisioned. One fought not with rifles, but with words and pamphlets. And yet the hunger for change, for revenge, for renewal, burned brighter than ever. The defeat at the hands of the regime had only fanned the flames. Now with the publication of Mein Kampf and Hitler's triumphant speeches, the embers of defeat were igniting into a blazing hunger for retribution. In the years that followed, you watched as Hitler honed his skills, mastering the art of public persuasion. He was a whirlwind of energy, his voice booming in the beer halls, his words electrifying the crowds. He spoke to their fears, their frustrations, their dreams, and they hung on every word. The masses had found their leader, and they were ready to follow him to the ends of the earth. But what about you? Did you navigate these treacherous waters? What role did you play in the rise of the Nazi Party? How did you balance your own ambitions with Hitler's growing shadow? As you stood shoulder to shoulder with him on the precipice of greatness, what choices did you make? What sacrifices did you endure? And how did those decisions shape not only your destiny but the fate of an entire nation? The story of Hitler's rise is one of charisma, propaganda, and blind ambition. But what was your story? Within the hallowed halls of the Munich beer halls, a different kind of drama was unfolding. A battle of wills, a clash of ideologies, a fight for the soul of Germany. Here, amidst the clinking of glasses and the haze of cigarette smoke, you and Hitler found yourself at opposite sides of a brewing conflict. This was your proving ground, a place where ordinary men became larger-than-life figures, and where your journey from follower to leader truly began. The air crackled with tension as you locked eyes with Hitler across the crowded room. He looked different here, more animated, more alive, and for a moment the noise of the crowd faded away. It was just you and him in a silent universe of unspoken words. A deep breath escaped your lips. It was time to make a choice. Stay loyal to the party, or break away and forge your own path. The days turned into weeks, the pressure mounted. The regime was watching, waiting for any sign of dissent. Fear hung heavy in the air, a suffocating blanket that threatened to smother any hope of rebellion. But fear was just one emotion stirring within you. There was also anger, a burning resentment towards the regime's grip on your life, on your very existence. Every whispered conversation, every furtive glance, every secret meeting was a reminder of the stakes involved. The fight for Germany's soul was reaching fever pitch, and you were right in the heart of it. This wasn't just about politics anymore. It was personal. It was about survival. The regime had stripped you of your rights, your dignity, your very identity. And now, it was time to take a stand. As you navigated the treacherous landscape of underground resistance, you encountered allies, comrades, who shared your defiance. Together, you formed a network of support, a lifeline in a sea of uncertainty. There were tense whispers in dark corners, coded messages passed between hurried breaths. Every encounter was a test of loyalty, a tightrope walk between courage and caution. You risked everything to distribute anti-regime leaflets, each sheet of paper a tiny act of rebellion, a silent scream against the oppressive order. But the regime was relentless. The threat of violence loomed over you like a dark cloud. You knew that every step you took, every move you made, you were being watched. The fear of discovery was a constant companion, a shadow that followed you everywhere you went. Yet despite the danger, the risk, there was no turning back. You were driven by a burning desire for justice, for freedom, for a better future. The fight was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The stage was set, the players were in place. All the world knew it was about to witness the rise of a movement that would change history forever. With every passing day, the stakes grew higher. The danger intensified. The regime's grip on Germany tightened, its shadow stretching long and dark across the land. You found yourself caught in a web of intrigue, deceit, and danger, where loyalty was tested and courage was paramount. As the forces of darkness closed in, you knew that the fate of Germany, perhaps even the world, hung in the balance. The time had come to choose your path, to decide whether you would rise with the sun or fall with the night. So tell me, will you embrace the coming darkness? Or will you defy the shadows and step into the light? Which path will you choose? What brings you here? To this place where history's fate turned on a typewriter? Perhaps you're a time traveler from a world where Hitler never rose to power. Or maybe you're simply a history buff with an insatiable curiosity. But as you stand in this very cell, the air around you seems to crackle with a strange energy. It's as if the whispers of the past are trying to tell you something profound. The year is 1924, and Germany is a nation in turmoil. The Great War has come to an end, leaving behind a bitter taste of defeat and the stench of death still lingering in the air. The Treaty of Versailles, with its harsh reparations and territorial losses, has ignited a powder keg of resentment among the German people. They yearn for a leader who can pull them from the ashes, someone who can restore their nation's pride and rewrite the terms of their surrender. Enter Adolf Hitler, a man whose name was synonymous with the failed putsch and the dark shadow of extremism. But that's only half the story. For as you stand here, it's essential to remember that Hitler isn't yet the infamous dictator we know from history books. He's a wounded man nursing his bruised ego in a fractured movement. As the door to the cell creaks open, you find yourself face to face with a man at a crossroads. Eyes, though shadowed with the weariness of recent defeat, still gleam with an unsettling intensity. The putsch may have failed, but the movement endures. And as you watch him emerge from the confines of his cell, you realize that this is just the beginning. Over the next 9 years, you witness the methodical and strategic rebuilding of the Nazi Party. Local chapters are established, the SA Sturmabteilung, or stormtroopers, are organized, and the cry for a new Germany echoes once again. Each rally becomes a meticulously staged spectacle, a sea of waving arms and chanting voices that send shivers down your spine. You find yourself drawn into the maelstrom of activity. Along with countless others, you distribute flyers that crackle with revolutionary fervor, plastering them onto frozen lampposts in the dead of night. You hand out leaflets on snow-choked streets, the words blurring in your numb fingers as you shout anti-Semitic slogans that shock even yourself. But amidst the chaos and the cold, there's a strange sense of camaraderie, a feeling of belonging that you've never known before. Dort, you feel the embers of defeat from the putsch slowly ignite into a blazing hunger for revenge, for renewal. And with every passing day, you're consumed by a desire to be part of something bigger than yourself, swept up in a torrent of printed words and public persuasion. And then there's the speeches. Those mesmerizing monologues that transport you to a different world where Germany stands tall and the Jews are banished. You sit in the crowded beer halls, the smell of stale waste and unwashed bodies mingling with the scent of fear and fanaticism. As Hitler takes the stage, the crowd erupts into a frenzy of cheers and applause. His voice, a booming crescendo that cuts through the din, is promising a return to greatness, promising a future free from the shackles of the past. With each word, he weaves a tapestry of hate and hope, painting a picture of a world where Germans are masters once again. And as you listen, you're not just an audience member, you're a willing participant. Your fists clench, your heart pounds in your chest, and you find yourself swept away in a current of pure emotion. But as the years pass and the crowds grow larger, a chilling thought creeps into your mind. What if this charismatic leader with his simplistic solutions and promises of glory is leading his followers, indeed all of Germany, to the brink of disaster? You see the darkness gathering on the horizon, the shadows of war and genocide looming ever closer, yet you're powerless to stop it. For in this twisted tale of history, you're not just a witness, you're an accomplice. You've seen firsthand the seductive power of propaganda, the intoxicating allure of a leader who promised to make Germany great again. And as the world hurtles towards the abyss, you can't help but wonder, how did we get here?
Weimar Germany, 1923. The hyperinflation crisis has just reached its peak. A German mark, once backed by gold, now buys only 1/4 of a cent's worth of U.S. currency. Your once proud nation faces international ridicule. Its government is dismissed as a joke. You clutch a fistful of notes, wondering how you'll ever buy bread for your family. Suddenly, a charismatic leader appears on the scene, pointing the way out of this mess. He offers hope of restoration and revenge. And as his movement grows, you find yourself swept up in it. Soon, you're joining Marseilles, hoisting the distinctive black, red and white flag and listening to powerful speeches about national renewal. This is the story of the Nazi Party's rise to power as told to you by one of its devoted members. When I first joined, I was attracted by the nationalist rhetoric and promised economic revival. But as the party grew, my role expanded beyond the rank and file. My boss at the printing press, noticing my insignia, offered me a choice: leave or become a full-time party member. There were two problems with that. First, we had no money. Second, there were too many chiefs and not enough Indians. So when the boss asked me to travel to Munich and help write the party program, I jumped at the chance. It wasn't glamorous. We worked long hours in a cramped room surrounded by piles of papers and coffee cups. But every morning, I got to see the Führer. We denoted each other as the guards brought our coffee ration, and he clamped his famous earphones over his ears. Then he'd settle in and begin dictating. Hitler spoke in a surprisingly steady voice, though sometimes it would rise in anger. He talked of creating a greater Germany, ridding the nation of the Jews and the Marxists who had weakened it. He railed against the parliamentary who could unsolve the country's problems, and declared that the time had come for strong leadership. He insisted that his vision was not merely negative, but positive as well. Germans would have the opportunity to build a great future. If they could be freed from the shackles of Versailles and embrace the vitality of the Nordic peoples, the driving force behind this rebirth would be the concept of Lebensraum territory to be seized in the east, to house the burgeoning German population. And most importantly, the key to achieving all of this lay in winning the hearts and minds of the German people. To that end, he wanted to publish his thoughts in a book. He called it Mein Kampf. I was given the simple task of helping tidy up the scraps of paper on which he'd scribbled his thoughts, and holding them as he spoke so he would have to stop. Over months, the book took shape, dictated in 2 volumes. It became a sort of manifesto, a tapestry of ideology, personal vendetta, and grand ambition. The first volume came out in July 1925, and the second followed a year later. Despite some of it feeling delusional to me, like his fantasies about ancient Nordic tribes, I knew what its publication meant for the party. When I read it, it felt as though he'd written it just for me. A chance to escape the humiliation of defeat and the despair of inflation. In fact, millions of Germans felt the same way. In December 1924, Hitler had been released from prison after serving less than a year of his 5-year sentence for trying to overthrow the government. I joined the party because I believed in its message, but also because I thought we were going places. And we were. The book sold well, and the party gained new members fast. I was posted in Munich as one of a handful of full-time party organizers responsible for building the base. I started with the usual street corner meetings, but soon moved on to bigger things. On the night of February 1926, I helped organize a rally at the Burger Brockler, attended by 2,500 people. That was the biggest crowd I'd seen yet, and I basked in the energy as Hitler entered to thunderous applause. The next day, the headlines in the socialist and liberal papers made it clear that the authorities viewed us as a threat, but I wasn't scared, I was excited. The paper said that during Hitler's speech, a fight nearly broke out between us and and that was true, except I was the one who almost came to blows. When a red front guard walked past me, I shouted, "Get out of here, you dirty Jew." He turned around and spat in my face. I threw a punch and he ducked under it. If the cops hadn't pulled me off, I would have killed him. I didn't care if they arrested me. If we were going to take over Germany, we needed to show that we weren't afraid of anything. Our activities continued to expand. By 1928, we had an extra 2,000 members, and many more. The Geleiters, or local leaders, were still something of a loose cannon. We held our first big conference in July of that year to try and get them disciplined into place. Some saw this as a setback, another sign that the party couldn't function without its charismatic leader, but I knew better. The conference was a huge success. Hitler arrived in a sea of waving arms and gave a 3-hour speech on the subject of nationalism, unification, and the need for discipline. The Gauleiter pledged their allegiance and agreed to build party cells across the nation. The following month, I sat in a packed town hall in Nuremberg as Joseph Goebbels unveiled another map. Up until then, we'd relied mostly on mass rallies to spread our message. But Goebbels, head of our propaganda department, argued that we needed a more sophisticated approach. From now on, he said, we'd use the newspapers, radio, and newsreels to make sure that everyone heard about the Nazi Party. Just before he spoke, I noticed a pile of leaflets on the floor, and curiosity got the better of me. I picked one up and studied it. On one side was a swastika and the words National Socialist German Workers' Party. The other side showed a clenched fist rising from behind a pile of wheat and proclaimed, "Do you want to know who is ruining the German people? Follow the trail of Jewish Bolshevism. Ask the Jew." Then came the coup de grace. The leaflet was designed to drop from a plane onto the streets of Munich. It was Goebbels' idea of a flying squadron, a team of aircraft that would crisscross the city dropping leaflets on a pre-selected route. The plane carrying the leaflets took off, and soon the sky above the town hall was littered with Nazi symbols. Later that night, I stood with thousands of others on the banks of the river Isar watching fireworks light up the sky. As the crowd cheered, I felt immense pride. Things were finally falling into place. I went on to become head of the Munich party and served under Göring when he reorganized the Sturmabteilung. I drilled my men into becoming instruments of terror, attacking communist meeting halls and breaking up leftist demonstrations. Of course, the police looked the other way when fights broke out. It was all part of the plan. The purpose of the SA was to put fear into the hearts of those who opposed us. And the best way to do that was to allow them to beat us up. We learned that trick from whenever we clashed with them, I told the men, "You don't have to win a fight. You have to look like you might lose it." By the early 1930s, we had infiltrated nearly every workplace in Germany. Party cells, or bays, operated under the noses of management, turning factories into breeding grounds for cells were set up everywhere, in the offices, in the machine shops, in the canteens. Once they were established, cell leaders would ensure that party doctrine filtered down through the ranks. They'd tell workers why they should support the Nazis and keep an eye out for troublemakers. I even had a few members in the trade unions, though they were forced to hide their colors. All the while, I watched as Goebbels used his mastery of propaganda to knit together the disparate elements of the movement. He ensured that newspaper articles, radio speeches, and daily newsreels all pointed in the same direction. A massive engine designed to turn out a single product: Hitler as Germany's singular savior. We took back control of filmmaking and turned out pro-Nazi movies like Triumph of the Will. By 1934, I was sure that we were ready. No one understood German politics better than we did. We knew exactly what to say to gain the support of the industrialists, the farmers, and the intellectuals. Weedy built a formidable network of spies and informants who kept tabs on everyone from factory owners to the clergy, and we'd created a culture of fear that made it impossible to speak out against us. Now all we needed was a pretext to take over. And then it came on June 1934, when a young man stepped out of a bar and fired 2 shots into the chimney. The victim was our vice-chancellor, Franz von Papen. It didn't kill him, but it gave Hitler the excuse he was waiting for. He immediately disbanded the cabinet and appointed himself as chancellor. I rushed to the chancellery to join the celebrations, and I wasn't alone. Thousands of Berliners had gathered outside cheering and singing. Hurrah for the Führer. When Hitler appeared on the balcony with his wife Eva, they roared their approval. I knew that it was the beginning of the end for Germany as I'd known it, but I didn't care. Standing there among the cheering crowd, I felt a surge of excitement. Finally, Germany would be great again. This is where our story ends. To hear more stories of the Third Reich, stay tuned. You are a member of the Nazi Party in 1932 Germany. For weeks, you've been walking the mean streets, watching people starve. The Wall Street crash of 1929 ravaged the German economy. Nearly 6 million people are now unemployed and families are scrounging for food. Around every corner, you see desperate faces and hear the same refrain. What is a man to do? You tell them you have the answer. You hand out copies of Mein Kampf, telling them this book will tell you all you need to know. It speaks of a glorious past and a bright future, a vision of renewal rooted in blood and soil, of national pride and strength. You tell them, the book will show them how to make Germany great again. And then it does. Hitler's movement surged from obscurity to prominence. After the party won the 1930 Reichstag elections, you went from a nobody to somebody important. Now, you campaign in factory districts, handing out pamphlets as bleak as the breadlines you pass. But there is hope, because Hitler has the solution. He alone can end the misery and bring back the good times. Put him in power, and he will put Germans back to work, building autobahns and factories. Crush the communists once and for all, and restore order and security to the streets of Germany. No more will you hear the bitter laughter of Berlin's cabaret culture. No more will you see foreign troops marching through your nation's capital. And though prices are still high, Hitler knows who to blame for every price hike. Every time the cost of living goes up, it is the Jews to blame. But things aren't going well. Hitler lost the 1932 election, and the party is divided. Some believe in armed revolution, others in peaceful parliamentary politics. You aren't sure which way things will go, but you do know one thing. There is no turning back. Either the nation will be saved, or it will be destroyed. As the party's fortunes rise and fall, you keep working, hoping against hope that one day soon you will see Germany whole and strong once more. Because when you think of your country, you think of a shattered vase, beautiful, but broken. Only Hitler can fix it. Only he can make the pieces fit together again. So you keep working, keeping faith that with Hitler at the helm, the fatherland will be whole and strong once more. And suddenly it is. On January 30th, 1933, you are standing in Berlin with thousands of others as President Paul von Hindenburg enters the room and names Hitler Chancellor. White-tie crowds erupt into cheers, waving swastika banners and singing the Horst Wessel, Lejuko, and help but smile as you look around the room at the men and women most likely to save Germany. Looking at the familiar faces of the Gauleiters Finn and Sears and ex-military smiling at their sides, you feel a surge of optimism. Maybe things really will get better. Maybe you really are on the right path. Outside, you march through the streets, saluting loyal party members lining the route and cheering wildly from the crowd. If only everyone could be here to witness this historic moment, to see Hitler as he really is. Strong, confident, a true leader. But not everyone is here, and some never will be. A few days later, the Reichstag mysteriously goes up in flames. You help paste emergency decrees on the city walls, ordering the arrest of communists and banning gatherings of more than 2 people. The fire was obviously the work of communists trying to destroy the new government before it even got started. Later, you will learn that a Dutch communist set the blaze. But you don't know that now. Right now, the streets are tense, the atmosphere heavy. The radio crackles with ominous news. Rumors spread quickly through the crowd. Are the communists coming for revenge? Is there a bigger plot to overthrow the government? Will the republic fall apart? As the days pass, people become more afraid. And what if Hitler isn't the right choice? What if the crowds were wrong? What if the entire country is about to tear itself apart? Then, as suddenly as it began, it's over. The atmosphere eases and people return to normal. The papers are full of the communists' defeat. People cheer. They're safe. Once more, they made the right choice. When they chose Hitler, they chose stability, prosperity, and peace. On March 23rd, you enter the Reichstag to hear the Enabling Act passed. You watch as the final shreds of Weimar democracy dissolve, and Hitler claims absolute power as his own. As the crowd cheers and gives the Nazi salute, you to join in. This is what you've been waiting for. Now the real work begins. The German people are behind Hitler and the Nazi Party. Together, you will renew the nation and make it great again. Now, you just have to convince the rest of the world. Germany in the early 1930s was a nation in crisis. The Great Depression hit Germany hard. Unemployment skyrocketed, and extremist parties gained momentum. Hitler's brand of hateful nationalism found fertile ground in this climate. His message of national revival resonated with many, and his anti-Semitic rhetoric appealed to deep-seated prejudices. Despite this, democratic institutions held firm. The German president and chancellor struggled to navigate these turbulent times, desperately seeking a way out of the crisis. But when faced with mounting extremism and societal unrest, they failed to find a solution. The Nazi Party's electoral success caught many by surprise, including the party's own leadership. Initially dismissed as a fringe movement, the Nazis surged in popularity, becoming the largest party in the right. This unexpected rise to power was fueled by fear, economic hardship, and a yearning for stability. However, this sudden prominence brought its own challenges. Within the party, different factions emerged, each vying for influence and power. Some advocated for violent revolution, while others pushed for a more moderate approach. This internal division threatened to undermine the party's cohesion and its ability to govern effectively. Despite these challenges, the Nazis continued to gain ground. Their propaganda machine churned out a constant stream of hateful and divisive messages, solidifying their base and creating a climate of fear and intimidation. The burning of the Reichstag, attributed to a communist, provided an opportunity for Hitler to consolidate power. The incident allowed him to paint a picture of an imminent communist takeover, thereby justifying the suspension of civil liberties and the curtailment of democratic rights. This atmosphere of fear and urgency propelled the Enabling Act through the legislative process. Lawmakers rushed to grant Hitler dictatorial powers, seduced by the promise of swift and decisive action to restore order and stability. Yet even as Hitler's grip on power tightened, opposition smoldered. Many Germans, despite the suppression of dissent, continued to resist the Nazi regime. They did so through underground movements, acts of civil disobedience, and even armed resistance. Despite the brutal crackdown, the spirit of resistance refused to be extinguished. The transition of power from Weimar democracy to Nazi dictatorship was a gradual process marked by manipulation, fear, and opportunism. Hitler's rise was not inevitable, but rather the product of a series of choices made by key players in German politics. The Weimar government aspired to address the economic crisis and quell extremists. Movements created a power vacuum that Hitler exploited. The German president's decision to appoint Hitler chancellor was a pivotal moment that set in motion the dismantling of democracy. Finally, the swift passage of the Enabling Act exemplified how fear and expedience can override principles of justice and equality. The story of Germany in the 1930s serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of democratic institutions and the dangers of populism and extremism. It is a tale that continues to resonate in modern times, urging us to remain vigilant against those who seek to exploit fear and division for their own gain. If you stepped out of your home in Berlin in the spring of 1933, you would have found it hard to believe that just months earlier, this city had hummed with the energy of a modern metropolis. Now the streets were patrolled by stormtroopers. New black, red and white flags, bearing the strange swastika emblem, were everywhere. And on government buildings, the party flag fluttered in the breeze. What happened here? How did this city and nation find itself so swiftly and completely transformed? You walk along the Leipziger Strasse, past department store facades adorned with the party's colors. Shop windows that once displayed the latest fashions or gleaming household appliances now proclaimed Aryan and German above the familiar products. Turning toward the Grand Tiergarten Park, you see crowds gathered around a man on a grassy knoll. As he raises his arm in a familiar salute, the crowd responds with a thunderous Sieg Heil. You recognize the man as Joseph Goebbels, the charismatic minister of propaganda. He speaks passionately about national renewal and German pride. His words, laced with venom, attack Jews, communists, and other enemies of the state. The crowd cheers wildly, their faces a mix of fervent loyalty and chilling fanaticism. In the distance, you hear the haunting strains of a German folk song, but the melody seems distorted, off-key, as if played on a music box that's seen better days. This is Volkslieder, German popular music, once a staple of the cherished German concept of coziness and conviviality. Now the Nazis twist these folksy tunes into propaganda, march and anthems for the masses. The carefree leader has become the soundtrack of a sinister new order. You hurry home, anxious to escape the unsettling spectacle. Once inside, you turn on the radio to hear the soothing voice of an announcer offering a reassuringly familiar BBC broadcast. But then a jarring crackle interrupts the program. A new German announcer takes over, declaring Berlin Radio a Nazi broadcasting station. All foreign stations are shut down. The streets are filled with uniformed party members. They march in goose-step formation, their brown shirts a stark, unsettling sight against the gray buildings. Everywhere you see the symbol of the party, the swastika. It's emblazoned on buildings, on vehicles, even on the uniforms of ordinary citizens. The streets are not as bustling as they once were. Many shops are shuttered. The cafes and restaurants you frequented now seem like relics of a bygone era. In the distance, you hear the rhythmic clang of a metal scraper. Looking up, you see a man scaling the side of a building. He pauses to paint over a faded election poster, hastily daubing out the remnants of a democratic past. Turn by turn, cities across Germany are being purged of their old political symbols. You pass by the Stadt, the headquarters of the new regime's campaign to synchronize every institution in Germany to the Nazi vision. Since the party's sweeping victory in March, trade union offices have been ransacked, their leaders arrested, their assets seized. Political parties, organizations, indeed any group outside the Nazi fold have been outlawed. Provincial governments have been replaced by leaders, obedient regional chiefs, who enforce the party's will. In recent weeks, thousands of civil servants have been dismissed, labeled politically unreliable. Soon, membership in the Communist or Social Democratic parties will bar you from your profession, even if you left the party years ago. Lawyers, doctors, teachers, and engineers must now prove their Aryan blood purity to practice their professions. But none dare defy this new reality. To question the regime means risking not only your livelihood, but your very survival. On the wall, a new poster depicts a stern-faced Adolf Hitler beside the words "a leader, a nation, a fatherland." Below, a smaller print warns that all will be well when everyone thinks and acts as one. You reach into your pocket to pull out a newspaper, but find only crumbled pages that once bore the headlines of a free press. The papers were the first casualties in this brave new world. Independent newspapers were closed, their equipment seized, their buildings those that still stand parrot Nazi propaganda, or have gone silent. As dusk falls, you hear the distant wail of a siren. Turning toward the sound, you see a black car with flashing lights speed by. Moments later, a plainclothes man emerges from a doorway and disappears into the crowd. You realize with a start that the Gestapo has formed. Heinrich Himmler's secret police have taken over. Ordinary citizens vanish in the night, and no one dares ask where they've gone. In the distance, a blood-chilling cackle echoes across the city. You turn toward the sound to see a group of young men in brown shirts and leather breeches striding purposefully through the night. The streets are empty, save for the menacing figures in their paramilitary uniforms. One carries a whip, another a heavy club. They stop in front of a building, kicking the door open and hauling a cowering man out onto the street. With a swift kick, one of the attackers sends him sprawling. Another kicks him again, harder this time, sending a sharp pain shooting through the man's leg. The man cries out, then slumps to the cobblestones, his face contorted in pain. The attackers laugh and disappear into the darkness, leaving the man groaning in the gutter. You hurry home, shaken by the night's events. Was this the new order, where there would be no more crime, no more poverty, only the harsh discipline of a new morality? You wonder what became of the Germany you once called home. That's all for this episode. Thanks for watching. By 1935, anonymous denunciations fueled daily terror. In cafes, people lower their voices, fearing slanderous remarks overheard by You join a mandatory Hitler youth rally, teeming with teens in neat uniforms. They recite oaths of loyalty to Adolf Hitler, singing Horst Wessel-Lied with fervent right-wing. Germany's future, it seems, belongs to this zealous youth movement. Meanwhile, you learn of academics dismissed from universities, their specialized knowledge deemed irrelevant, or worse, subversive. Textbooks rewrite history to glorify an invented Aryan supremacy, erasing the contributions of Jews and other minorities. Cinema newsreels show smiling workers on Autobahn crews, building projects that will connect and dominate Europe. Daily radio broadcasts praise the Führer and deride degenerate art, music, and literature that undermines German values. But where are the checks and balances that defined? Gone are the days when political parties competed for votes and the parliament. The Reichstag made laws representing the people. Now only one party remains, the Nazi Party, and its leader. Well, he is not a president. He is the Führer, the embodiment of the state itself, brooking no dissent. All opposition has been silenced, co-opted, or driven underground. Every institution, from schools to factories to farms, is warped into a tool of Nazi control, and society itself is weaponized. Neighbors spy on neighbors, turning ordinary life into a minefield of fear and paranoia. By 1935, everyday Germans live in a perpetual state of anxiety, always watching what they say, how they vote, who they meet, even whom they marry. If you speak out against the regime, if you harbor what they call a hostile thought, you too will face the consequences. Joining those already in the camps, those who have disappeared, or worse, those who lie dead in the streets after a long fall, from a window shattered by a sniper's bullet or a blade plunged deep in some dark alley. On September 15, 1935, you'll read the Nuremberg laws in the morning paper. The previous evening, the Reichstag had passed these laws in a near-unanimous vote. Jews are stripped of German citizenship and forbidden to marry or even have relations with true Germans. Overnight, A friend, a colleague, a neighbor. Anyone who happens to be Jewish is branded an outsider, a non-person in the eyes of the law. That evening, you pass a synagogue. Its large stained glass windows are sealed shut. Scrawled across the glass are hateful words, Judon, Lech mich, and a menacing swastika. Before long, this will be a familiar sight. After Kristallnacht on November 9, 1938, you see shattered glass on the curbs, battered Torah scrolls discarded in gutters, and your Jewish neighbors weeping at the ruins of their businesses. Homes and synagogues are destroyed, corpses strewn across the pavement outside. This state-sanctioned pogrom, this organized violence, leaves no doubt that the peaceful life that once defined Germany is now over for millions. In its place, a nightmarish present and future that will be decided by unremitting violence. The road ahead leads only to camps, to exile or death. In just 6 years, the Weimar Republic's democratic promise has been crushed beneath the totalitarian machinery of the Nazi state. You have watched neighbors turn on neighbors. People become comfortable with the discomfort of others. You have seen institutions warped into tools of control, society weaponized by fear, an entire population stripped of rights in the name of racial purity. A hollowed-out husk of its former self, Germany stands poised on the brink of a new and darker chapter. Imagine a crisp dawn on September 1, 1939. You stand at a Belgian border checkpoint, hoping to visit family for the summer holidays. But suddenly you hear the roar of panzers, German tanks with steel tracks grinding over cobblestones. The sky vibrates with the drone of Stuka bombers, their sirens wailing like metal banshees. This is the first day of World War II. You are a soldier of the German victorious in a stunning campaign across western Poland, the Low Countries and France, where entire armies surrendered at your feet. But as 1941 gives way to 1942, ominous rumblings echo from the east. Will you lead the next great German victory? Or will the brave New World Order you've helped create falter on the shores of the mighty Volga? What would you, soldier of the Wehrmacht, do? In this uncertain moment, in May 1940, when you crossed the Meuse, the war in the West was already a rout. Over 6 weeks, your elite corps sliced across the frontier. Within hours, you hunkered in a foxhole carved hastily into the soft earth, your heart pounding as anti-tank guns sputtered. In the distance, the farmsteads were aflame, sending tall black fingers to the sky. Now the trees seemed to press close to the road, forming a tunnel of leaves that hid the enemy. Then they came rushing across the field, a wave of humanity carrying bundles of clothing, kitchen pots, family photos, and children. Where were they going? Why did they flee? What did they know that you didn't? Your comrades yelled for them to hurry up and get out of the way. As dusk fell, the sky blazed with rockets and artillery. Mortar landed with whistling screams among the houses. Barrages shook the ground and rattled your teeth. And then through it all, the steady drone of Messerschmitts and Heinkels, their dive brakes and sirens rising above the din. By the second week of September, Warsaw is all around you. Factories fall silent, farmlands abandoned. The only sounds now are the rattle of tank tracks and the ceaseless rumble of artillery. The Vistula River is choked with refugees fleeing toward the west. Soon, hunger and smoke begin to choke the city's last defenders. Streets grow silent, empty of all but rubble and the dead. On September 27th, the city capitulated. 6 weeks of blitzkrieg demonstrate the cruel efficacy of speed and surprise. Before the ruins of Warsaw even cool, you are redeployed to Belgium once more, this time as an occupying soldier. The French Maginot Line is flanked by paratroopers and spearheaded by 2,500 armored vehicles. You follow behind the armored spearhead as they smash through the thin line of defense raised by the French. Along the Meuse, towns fall in days. From Dunkirk, the beaches fill with stranded British troops awaiting evacuation. The port of Calais burns under relentless bombs, and by June 14th, German forces march down the Champs. Paris falls without a shot being fired. In a grand gesture, Hitler tours the capital, paper lanterns bobbing in the Seine's gloom. The Eiffel Tower glows with triumphant illumination. For 4 years, the French had proclaimed that this day would never come. On June, in a formal ceremony outside of Paris, you watch as French leaders sign the document of surrender. Over the next few months, millions of grateful Germans stream into France, joining you in occupying the land of your fathers, or simply taking long-awaited vacations in Paris and along the French Riviera. But there is another who has watched the defeat of France with growing unease. Winston Churchill, the bulldog of Britain. Every day, he rallies his people with defiant words. This is our finest hour. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall never surrender. His words strike home. As summer melts into fall, the threat of invasion grows ever more imminent. You man an anti-aircraft battery in Dover, watching nervously as the white cliffs of England seem to grow ever closer. At night, searchlights pierce clouds of smoke, painting the skies with eerie beams of light. Flak bursts overhead in lethal arcs, spitting fire and steel toward the distant bombers. The whine of aircraft fills the air. RAF Hurricanes and Spitfires duel Luftwaffe bombers in deadly embrace. their dogfights echoing like clashing swords in the darkness. Beneath you, Londoners seek refuge in underground stations, sleeping beneath the very bombs that might snuff out their lives. Tiny toddlers clutch gas masks, half their size, ready to damn them should the dreaded air raid sirens sound. The Blitz reduces vast neighborhoods to rubble, yet Britain refuses to bend. In the end, Hitler calls off the invasion, his dream of conquest postponed. By October, the first major check to Nazi expansion since the invasion of Russia comes. As you stand with your comrades, watching the channel, wondering if tomorrow you will cross to the other side. In the quiet of late 1940, you read Joseph Goebbels' rapturous account of the coming thousand-year Reich. After winning the war in the West, the true test beckons. Rumors have circulated for months, whispers of a mighty new German assault against the Soviets in the East. Dawn breaks over Brest-Litovsk as the shockwaves of Operation Barbarossa reach you. 3.2 million Axis troops surge east, crashing through the unprepared Maginot Line. You find yourself suddenly thrust into the van of this gigantic offensive. Around you, waves of infantry crash against Soviet defenses, while columns of half-tracks surge forward, mowing down all before them. The initial victories stun both sides. Within days, Brest-Litovsk falls. The Russians must be stopped. Soon, you race through the Ukrainian countryside, flying back to base between attacks. In the rear, men joke about the strange new foe. Is it true, as some say, that the Russians ride saber-wielding cavalry horses into battle? Others claim that they fight like fanatical priests possessed by the devil. When you return from your brief leave, your unit is preparing to move again. The summer heat scorches the fields around Kharkiv as the battle rages. All around you, veterans of the France campaign and men who have known only the war in the East prepare to take Moscow. With supplies low and partisans active, the Red Army fights stubbornly. As summer gives way to autumn, the Rasputitsa, the rains arrive, turning the fields into sucking, clinging mud. The much-vaunted German victories slow to a halt. Soon, winter frost arrives. Freezing cannons, solid encoding helmets with crystalline breath. Through it all, the Kremlin flags flutter defiantly over snow-draped domes. At your post, you shiver in the biting wind. It's been 16 days since you've seen an end. Somewhere far to the north, Finnish troops push toward Lenin. Romanian and Hungarian units strain to hold the Caucasus. To the west, fierce fighting continues. The Allies have landed in North Africa, and rumors swirl of Allied troops massing in Britain, preparing for an invasion across the Channel. Back in Berlin, Goebbels speaks confidently of victory, though no one dares ask him how. A wave of Soviet counterattacks washes over you. Like a wall of ice, the Rasputitsa thaws and turns the earth to sucking mud once more. Still, the Wehrmacht pushes on, reaching the gates of Stalingrad in the summer of 1942. The German soldiers are exhausted and depleted, but even so, the Soviets cannot dislodge them. By late July, when the news reaches you, Hitler has declared Stalingrad the property of the Führer, but there are rumors that something has gone wrong. The reports speak of entire German divisions wiped out, of supply lines straining to deliver fuel and ammunition to the front. Now the cities of the Caucasus beckon. You huddle around a small fire with your comrades, listening to the wind sighing through the stubble field. Each of you knows what awaits. The war that seemed destined to last only a few swift victories has become a long, grinding struggle. Would you, soldier of the Wehrmacht, be the one to help turn the tide? Or will the brave new world order you have helped create falter on the banks of the mighty Volga? What would you do in this uncertain moment? As Operation Barbarossa grinds on through the winter of 1941, the Wehrmacht faces a stark reckoning. Initial triumphs have given way to brutal setbacks. Victory seems tantalizingly close, yet frustratingly elusive. Deep within Nazi Germany, a storm is brewing. As the war enters its third year, the world hangs in the balance. Will you be part of the Wehrmacht's triumphant rebirth, or its ignominious collapse? Choose your path wisely, for the fate of Europe may well depend on it. As the Eastern Front grinds forward, you witness a darker war unfolding behind the lines. The same motorized divisions that scorched Soviet fields bring with them specialist einsatz. Late summer 1941, you accompany an The air is thick with the stench of fear. Jews, Roma, communist officials rounded up in town squares are forced to undress and stand at the edge of hastily dug pits. You hear rifle volleys crack like brittle bone. Bodies topple, falling into open graves. You avert your eyes. Stomach churn. The commandant notes, efficiency, gentlemen, as he inspects piles of clothing. This clandestine massacre thousands murdered this way sets a precedent for industrial-scale murder. The Wannsee Conference, January 20th, 1942. You read the brief calling, the Wannsee Conference. In a lakeside villa in suburban Berlin, 15 high-ranking officials gather. Reinhard Heydrich outlines the final solution, the organized deportation of Jews to death camps. You visualize the gleaming notes. Auschwitz, the plan is clinical. Rail, transport, forced labor, and extermination upon arrival. The room's hush speaks louder than propaganda. This is genocide by bureaucratic decree. But there's more to the story, more you need to know. The Einsatzgruppen's advance. As the Wehrmacht pushed into the east, so did the Einsatzgruppen mobile killing squads, embedded within army groups. Tasked with rooting out undesirables, they employed terror as their primary weapon. Ghettos were established, isolating targeted populations. Homes were marked with a yellow star, their occupants forced to the street, then marched to the east, deeper into the Soviet Union. There, the Einsatzgruppen claimed to be rescuing the German people from Bolshevism and its Jewish The victims, mostly Jewish, numbered in the hundreds of thousands. The killings were swift and brutal, carried out with pistols or submachine guns. The victims were ordered to undress for disinfection, delousing, they were called it, before being led to their deaths. The pace was frenetic. Medical examiners struggled to keep up, issuing certificates of cause of death that read, simply, a gunshot wound. Superficially, these killings resembled those of the First World War. Soldiers in combat shooting first and asking questions later. But this was no longer the era of trench warfare. The new methods were faster, more efficient, more deadly. By the end of 1941, nearly 5,000 Einsatz, the vans would pull up to a building. Townspeople would be ordered outside and told that everyone inside was being disinfected. Then the townspeople were told to go home. When they did, they would find their neighbors dead. Having inhaled lethal doses of Cyclone B, the advance continued with terrifying speed, taking the war on multiple fronts into the very core of the Soviet Union, the Wannsee Conference. By early 1942, the killings were proceeding at such a pace that Berlin decided the operation needed a central office. On January 15, high-ranking officials gathered at a lakeside villa in suburban Berlin for what would become known as the Wannsee Conference. The agenda: the final solution to the Jewish question. Reinhard Heydrich, head of the Sicherheitsdienst, outlined the plan for organized mass Jews would be taken from their ghettos to transit camps, then loaded onto trains and transported to one of 6 specially designated extermination camps. There, men, women, and children would be exterminated, their bodies burned in gas chambers. The operation was vast and complex, requiring the full weight of the Nazi infrastructure. The men in the room discussed statistics, the number of trains required, the capacity of each railcar, the timetable for They talked about the killings as if they were manufacturing orders or an assembly line. All in all, it was like any other day in the Third Reich. Words like extermination and Aryanization were used. Instead, Heydrich referred to the deportation and resettlement of Jews. He explained that certain individuals would be selected for special labor battalions, which meant they would be sent to the east to work until they died. Others would be deemed unfit for labor and sent to specially designated shower facilities. Participants were given reading material describing the progress of the killings, including a film called The Jewish Doctor, which showed how Zyklon gas vans were used to murder Jews in the streets and basements of buildings. After 4 hours of discussion, the conference ended without a vote, without dissent. The minutes were brief, almost clinical, making no mention of the horrific purpose of the meeting. The final solution was underway. Now watch our full video on the Wannsee Conference. Click here, or check out this other content. You are a witness for the prosecution at the International Military Tribunal at Nuremberg. Your testimony, a first-hand account of crimes against humanity during the Holocaust. The year is 1946. The crimes for which the defendants are being tried took place between 1941 and 1945. You will not speak to the origins of Nazi racial hatred or its early manifestations. You will focus on the horrors you witnessed during the war, starting with the ghettos. Back at the front, you hear radio reports of the Warsaw and Lodz ghettos. You see walls rise, enclosing hundreds of thousands of people. Within, disease and starvation stalk the streets. You recall a clandestine journal smuggled out of the Warsaw ghetto by a young Polish woman. It describes children scavenging for scraps of food, corpses left lying in the streets, the stench of stale waste and urine, the constant threat of deportation, the public hangings in the main square of men and women who dared to protest the ghetto's harsh conditions. And there are legends of resistance, of secret weapons, caches, and of a Jewish underground army preparing to strike back at the Germans. Then, in April 1943, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising erupts. You watch as fighters armed with a few rifles and pistols hold out for weeks against SS tanks and artillery. You admire their courage, but you know that it is a doomed stand. Fighters are betrayed and murdered, their families deported and murdered, all for nothing. Soon, the ghetto is quiet again. The only sounds the rumble of German trucks and the murmur of those who survived the massacre. Then you are sent to the east, and you see the trains. Summer 1942. You watch as trains disgorge their human cargo at Auschwitz. You see the smoke coiling from the twin chimneys. You watch as guards in black uniforms direct the terrified arrivals onto ramps. Those deemed unfit for labor, mostly women, children, and the elderly, are herded into buildings marked with a red cross. You soon learn that these are gas chambers disguised as showers. One day, you are close enough to hear the hiss of Zyklon B pellets being dropped into the chamber. Minutes later, you see Sonderkommandos, special detachments of prisoners, removing bodas and shoving them onto conveyor belts leading to crematoria. You stand at a safe distance, but the screams echo in your mind. Here in the heart of occupied Poland, Hitler's long-cherished racial ideology has found its final, merciless culmination. In these years, you have witnessed the best and worst of humanity. You saw the German police unleash the full measure of their brutality on the Jews of Eastern Europe, shooting defenseless men and children, burning their homes and businesses, stripping them of their possessions, forcing them into ghettos. But you also saw the victims fighting back, not always successfully, but bravely nonetheless, with protests, strikes, uprisings, and acts of sabotage. And here, most terrifying of all, you have seen the machinery of death, the crematoria, gas chambers, and conveyor belts, all designed to carry out one grim purpose: the systematic murder of entire families in an industrialized process. Europe has become a continent of ash, bones, and broken promises. The alliance has won the war, but the crimes you have witnessed may be too great to ever be undone. Still, you must continue your testimony. There is much that you have not spoken of yet, like the deportations from your own home country, the gassing of Soviet POWs in the East, or the mad dash to the finish line when the Allies were advancing and the Germans were desperate. You have stories to tell, terrible stories, and you must find the strength to do so, because if you don't, who will? The roar of German victories gives way to the grinding roar of retreat. By mid-1942, the Nazi war machine, once unstoppable, creaks under the strain of overextended fronts and fierce resistance. Stalingrad's defeat. In November 1942, your unit is sent to the Volga River's banks, where the city of Stalingrad smolders under relentless bombardment. You march through ruble-strewn streets. Columns of half-frozen men trudge through knee-deep snow. Tanks sit idle, starved of fuel, as Soviet snipers exposed your every move. When the Red Army encircles your division, you find yourself trapped inside a living hell. Hunger, gnaws, frostbite stiffens your fingers. The icy air carries distant cries. In January 1943, you surrender one of the first large-scale German capitulations, and the legend of Nazi invincibility shatters. Allied landings and the openings of new fronts. Back in Western Europe, June 6, 1944, D-Day heralds the long-anticipated Allied invasion of Normandy. You are stationed near Kent. The beaches shimmer with the silhouettes of landing craft at dawn. Bombardments reduce cliffs to debris. Paratroopers land behind enemy lines. The Allies' foothold expands by the day, driving east across France. You taste dust and fear as panzer divisions scramble to contain the breakout. Each hour sees more villages liberated. Each night brings Allied bombers roaring toward German soil. Homefront bombardments and declining morale. Within Germany, the skies grow ominous, with RAF and USAAF formations. Night after night, incendiary raids transform Hamburg, Dresden, and Berlin into flames. You witness cities reduced to rivers of fire, civilians huddling in reinforced shelters. Propaganda, trumpets, resilience, but you see the truth. Families displaced, supplies scarce, and the once unshakable belief in Führer's promises eroding with every siren's way up. The turning tide. Now, in the summer of 1944, the war on two fronts grinds you down. You stand before an improvised altar in a bombed-out church, watching young men offer their last mass. Before deployment to the east, you pray for a swift death, a merciful end to the horror that's become your life. But as the weeks pass, the war of position solidifies into a stalemate. You fight not for territory, but to hold the line. And when the inevitable order to retreat comes, you know there will be no respite, only a race to a new front, onward to the east. In the spring of 1945, you find yourself in Hungary. The familiar routine of war has hardened you. Every morning, you scan the horizon for the telltale billowing smoke, then race to man your post as incoming shells splinter the trees around you. In the evenings, you huddle in makeshift trenches, sharing what little food you have, knowing that soon you'll need every ounce of strength to fight another day. With each passing week, the war grows more desperate. Civilians flee ahead of the advancing Russians, adding to the growing tide of refugees crowding the roads. As Soviet troops close in, you hear whispers of the atrocities they commit. Entire villages wiped out, prisoners worked to death. You wonder, will anyone remember what we've done here? The final days? By April, the war is a maelstrom that threatens to engulf everything. The Russian onslaught seems unstoppable. In the face of relentless attacks, your unit fights on, though your guns fall silent as ammunition dwindles. On April 29, 1945, an order arrives that takes you by surprise. The troops are to lay down their weapons and seek a way home. Over the next few days, you walk toward the west, joining hundreds of thousands of other Germans who've laid down their arms. You've survived the war, but its echoes will stay with you forever. Click here to play as the Allies and win the war against the Axis. or click here to play as the Japanese and fight against the combined might of the British, Americans, and Soviets. Whichever path you choose, will you be able to turn the tide of war in your favor? The roar of German victories gives way to the grinding roar of retreat. By mid-1942, the Nazi war machine, once unstoppable, creaks under the strain of overextended fronts and fierce resistance. Stalingrad's defeat. In November 1942, your unit is sent to the Volga River's banks, where the city of Stalingrad smolders under relentless bombardment. You march through ruble-strewn streets. Columns of half-frozen men trudge through knee-deep snow. Tanks sit idle, starved of fuel, as Soviet snipers exposed your every move. When the Red Army encircles your division, you find yourself trapped inside a living hell. Hunger, gnaws, frostbite stiffens your fingers. The icy air carries distant cries. In January 1943, you surrender one of the first large-scale German capitulations, and the legend of Nazi invincibility shatters. Allied landings and the openings of new fronts. Back in Western Europe, June 6, 1944, D-Day heralds the long-anticipated Allied invasion of Normandy. You are stationed near Caen. The beaches shimmer with the silhouettes of landing craft at dawn. Bombardments reduce cliffs to debris. Paratroopers land behind enemy lines. The Allies' foothold expands by the day, driving east across France. You taste dust and fear as panzer divisions scramble to contain the breakout. Each hour sees more villages liberated. Each night brings Allied bombers roaring toward German soil. Home front bombardments and declining morale. Within Germany, the skies grow ominous, with RAF and USAAF formations. Night after night, incendiary raids transform Hamburg, Dresden, and Berlin into flames. You witness cities reduced to rivers of fire, civilians huddling in reinforced shelters. Propaganda trumpets, resilience, but you see the truth. Families displaced, supplies scarce, and the once unshakable belief in Führers, promises eroding with every siren's. On the Eastern Front, the war of position has begun. For the past 2 years, you have tasted only lightning offensives, rapid advances, and the intoxicating thrill of victory. But now the pace, your enemies are dug deep into the frozen earth, their defenses bristling with deadly intent. The winter of 1942-43 arrives, a harsh mistress that freezes men and machines alike. Each assault becomes a battle of attrition, a costly toll of lives for negligible gains. The myth of German superiority seems less absolute with every setback, and as the spring thaw melts into summer, the specter of another Stalingrad looms. Soviets launch massive attacks, their forces seemingly endless. Divisions that once spearheaded Germany's triumphs are now hard-pressed to hold their positions. Retreat becomes an all-too-frequent refrain, and as the Russian summer burns away, you find yourself on the banks of the Berezina, the very ground where Napoleon's Grande met its doom. Can the Germans, like their enemies of old, withstand the Colossus of Russia? Or will they, like Napoleon's, be ground beneath its unyielding might? In the West, the Allied bridgehead in Normandy has become a beach. The Americans and British, with their vast resources and manpower, refuse to yield an inch. Every day, they inch closer to German soil, liberating villages and hastening the day when your country's borders will be breached. A new front opens in the Balkans. As the Red Army rolls into Romania, the threat to your homeland grows ever more imminent. The war that was meant to be swift and glorious is becoming a protracted affair, a war of attrition that threatens to bleed your nation into submission. Can Germany, with its dwindling resources and manpower, withstand the combined might of the Allies? Or is it already too late? Will the fatherland fall, not with a bang, but a whimper? As 1943 draws to a close, you, along with millions of others, prepare to face the coming year, a new year, the year of 1944, a year that will decide the fate of Germany and Europe. What will your role be in deciding that fate? Will you be a hero or a victim of circumstance? The choice, my friend, is yours. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button and subscribe for more content. Your support helps us grow and brings the history of World War II to life. For more people, you are a foreign correspondent covering the end of World War II. By April 1945, Hitler retreats to the Vorbunker beneath the Reich. Word filters through. He has married Eva Braun. The Soviets are a few blocks away. You picture the underground corridors, narrow, dimly lit by flickering bulbs. Maps strewn across tables. Generals arguing quietly. On April 30th, you learn of his suicide. A final radio announcement confirms it. The Führer has fallen. A few hours later, Berlin surrenders. You step onto the shattered streets, the Reichsstream in ruins, and the world begins to exhale in cautious relief. With Stalingrad's winter defeat, Normandy's beachhead, relentless bombings, and the Vorbunker's despair, Germany's grand ambitions collapse in 5 brutal years. You have witnessed a turning tide where technicians of war become refugees of defeat, and now stand amid the ashes of a shattered empire. The war ends not with a roar of victory, but with silent processions of refugees and lines of prisoners. In late 1945, Allied forces convened in the ruined city of Nuremberg, once famed for Nazi rallies, now chosen to try the regime's leaders. The Nuremberg trials begin. Picture the Grand Palace of Justice, scarred by war, its courtroom ringed by Allied guards. You take a seat among spectators as the International Military Tribunal opens on November 20th, 1945. Seated at the dock are Hermann Göring, Rudolf Hess, and 12 other high-ranking officials. Prosecutors from the US, UK, Soviet Union, and France outline charges of crimes against peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Each prosecutor reads statements of survivors. Ghettos emptied, gas chambers sealed, children's screams recounted in staccato sobs. You feel a heavy hush as the weight of evidence presses down like the bombed-out sky outside. It is here in this shattered city, in this ravaged courtroom, that the world confronts the evil it unleashed. Each day you watch the accused swagger, scoff, whisper and hush German. They preen, prime posture, interrupt, mumble, sneer, argue with the judges. But when the prosecutors rise, they fall silent. Day after day, the evidence mounts, tightening its noose of inescapable logic. Film footage is projected on a screen. Shaky, grainy images of men in uniform pushing people into the fires of a burning oven. Photographs flash. Emaciated prisoners, skeletal figures with shaved heads and vacant eyes standing before a wall. Their hands are raised in stiff-armed salutes or hang loosely at their sides. Listeners are shown piles of shoes, neatly stacked leather and canvas beside a wall. A mountain range of coats and hats. Each article stripped from victims and laid in cold, meticulous rows. You hear testimony from witnesses who recount horrors barely imaginable. Selections, deportations, gassings, cremations, the very machinery of industrialized murder. These are things, you think, that can never be undone. Can justice, you wonder, truly be served? And yet day after day, the accused show no remorse, shrugged at the mounting evidence, interrupt, shout, deny. It is hard to look away, harder still to believe that any of them could ever admit guilt. And then there is Göring, the swaggering swaggerer, the brash, bold thunderer, face pale and drawn, eyes blank and staring. One day he does not rise when the others are led away. He stays seated, shoulders slumped, head bowed. Is that, you think, the ghost of Nuremberg, the specter of justice? Or is it only fatigue, the weariness of one condemned? On October 1st, 1946, the tribunal delivers its verdict. Each defendant is found guilty on counts of crimes against peace and crimes against humanity. Several are acquitted on lesser war crimes. The defendants are sentenced to prison terms and fines. Some are hanged, some walk free. Hermann Göring is to be hanged, but he manages to swallow a cyanide capsule. As the first noose is adjusted around his neck, Rudolf Hess is given a life sentence. He will die in 1979. The trials are over. The judgments, are not enough to assuage survivors or bring closure to a world still reeling from the past 5 years. There will be other tribunals, other trials, and still later, denazification courts. But in this moment, as the last defendant is led out of the courtroom, you sense that justice has begun its long, arduous march. Trials proceed. Germany is carved into occupation zones. In each zone, you witness denazification courts where former party members answer for their involvement. Some commit suicide rather than face judgment. Others claim they were mere followers, unaware of atrocities. Meanwhile, you see American planners launching Operation Paperclip, whisking German scientists, some implicated in weapons development, off to the US for rocket research. Rebuilding begins. Melted down tanks become tractors. Factory ruins give way to charred steel skeletons that communities rally to clear. Yet, amid the rubble, deep wounds fester. Survivor, testimonies, and memory. From 1946 onward, survivors publish memoirs. Elie Wiesel, Primo Levi's harrowing accounts of Auschwitz. You attend a small gathering in Munich. A survivor there speaks. They took our names, our clothes, our humanity, but they could not steal our memories. In classrooms, teachers introduce lessons on the Holocaust. In synagogues, memorial services honor lost families. Monuments rise. Buchenwald's Granite Memorial. The Yad Vashem Institute's archives in Jerusalem. Through these efforts, the world vows, never again. But are we listening? Do we really hear the echoes of 6 million souls snuffed out? Millions more driven from their homes? Their lives appended? Or have we relegated their stories to a history book, a footnote, a gray rectangle on our computer screens? Have we allowed the phrase Holocaust Memorial to become a tagline, a slogan slapped on a calendar to mark a day in April? If so, we diminish the sacrifice, the struggle, the survival. We betray the dead and the living. The liberation of the camps was not the end. It was the beginning of a trial, a reckoning, a rebirth. The world stood witness at Nuremberg. The SS men who oversaw the machinery of murder were brought to justice. Perpetrators faced justice, some big, some small. ordinary Germans returned from exile, retook their citizenship, and began the hard work of remembrance. We are here today because 78 years ago, our fathers and mothers, our brothers and sisters, all of us, we answered the call. We fought for freedom, for democracy, for the very soul of humanity. We remember the victims. We confront anti-Semitism and hate in all its forms. We ensure that the liberators, those who risked and gave their all, are celebrated and honored. Our obligation is to be witnesses. Survivors bear witness with their life stories, their art, their quiet dignity. Victims without a voice find their strength in us, in our commitment to keep watch, to remain vigilant, to confront distortion and denial. It is our duty to never forget, to teach and learn from the past, and to build a better future. For, in remembering, we reclaim the narratives, the stories of our loved ones taken from us, and in doing so, we discover or rediscover our humanity. By 1949, new tensions fracture the Allied alliance. The Soviet zone becomes East Germany, the Federal Republic. You walk the streets of Berlin divided by checkpoints, ghostly flags of rival ideologies, fluttering over battered buildings. Former Nazis, vetted or overlooked, find work in civil service industry, and academia summating U.S. intelligence against the Soviets. The post-war decade blends justice with realpolitik, leaving moral ambiguities. Victory over Nazism, married to toleration of its remnants, in service of a new conflict. The Nuremberg trials and ensuing decade testified to humanity's determination to reckon with atrocity, yet remind you that triumphs over evil can be partial and fraught. Germany's post-war rebirth is built on legal reckoning, survivor memory, and geopolitical necessity, a fragile balance that shapes the world that follows. The war's end ushered in new challenges: how to remember, how to rebuild, and how to prevent history's darkest chapters from repeating. From the mid-1950s onward, the world grappled with Hitler's legacies through memorials, scholarship, and sporadic resurgence of extremist ideology. Building memorials and museums in 19... Survivors and their descendants begin erecting monuments. The memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe in Berlin is a forest of concrete stele evoking endless graves. In Warsaw, the Ghetto Heroes Monument commemorates ordinary people's extraordinary courage. You visit Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, its archives bulging with testimonies, photographs, and art salvaged from ghettos. Each displayed children's shoes, a scorched Torah scroll carves memory into the public conscience. School groups troop through exhibits, educators insist on never again, and families press tram tickets preserved from deportation trains to trembling lips. But it is not enough to preserve the past. You must also teach it. So you attend classes at the University of Haifa, where the roster of Holocaust courses rivals that of medieval literature. Israeli universities pioneer Holocaust studies as an academic discipline, training generations of scholars who will bear witness to the dead. Meanwhile, back in Germany, the pedagogue Hannah Arendt shocks the country with her book, The Origins of Totalitarianism. Though Jewish Arendt has lived in Germany longer than Israel and argues that totalitarianism is not an aberration but the logical conclusion of modern democracy, banishment of evil. Her influential work lays the groundwork for coming to terms with Nazism, showing how ordinary men and women succumb to its siren call. But how do you come to terms with an event so cataclysmic that it defies comprehension? In 1960, the Frankfurt School of Critical Theorists publishes the monumental study, The Destruction of European Jewry, 1933 to 1945. Its pages dense with data, evacuation orders, ghetto maps, death camp statistics, become a touchstone for understanding the Holocaust. It humanizes the victims, mapping the machinery of annihilation. Another group of scholars struggles to quantify the Judenfrage, the Jewish question. How many were murdered? How many survived? How much was stolen? Their answer is a number that will haunt the century: 6 million. In this new age of remembrance, survivors take the floor. Testifying before West German courts in the 1960s and 70s, they relive their traumas, naming names, describing horrors, demanding justice for crimes long done. Their voices are chronicled in collections like The Survivor Speaks, edited by Thomas Kim, which compiles harrowing tales from Ravensbrück Sobibor. These first-hand accounts become essential reading, creating a public sphere of trauma. They also publish novels and memoirs. Charlotte Delacour, a child survivor, recounts her ordeal in a moving memoir. And Anne Frank, whose father Otto survives the camps, publishes her diary, a timeless testament to the human cost of hate. Yet even as survivors speak, the world changes. As the children of survivors, you are born into a changed world. Your parents are reluctant to speak of their past, so you pore over photo albums, tracking faces erased by time. You hear snatches of stories in the clink of a spoon on a glass, the rustle of newspaper, the murmur of a foreign language. Sometimes sleep brings the most vivid memories, haunted by landscapes of ash and smoke. Then waking up to your parents' anxious faces, you learn about neighbors, turned strangers, relatives you never knew. in the small acts of resistance that sustained them, smuggling radios, tending secret gardens, preserving traditions. Their defiance gives you hope, showing that even in the darkest times, the human spirit perseveres. But the world outside your home is changing too. By the 1970s, peace between Israel and its Arab neighbors seems a distant dream. And the Holocaust, once relegated to the distant past, reemerges as a rallying cry in the polarized world of the Cold War. The specter of genocide haunts the world stage as the 1970s bring new atrocities in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia. Survivors speak out, warning against complacency. Remembering the past becomes a way to shape the present and ensure that never again is more than a slogan. It is a promise. Let's talk about the past. Let's talk about all the things that on January we remember. It's the day after the fall of the Berlin Wall, November 1989. A year from now, you will stand before the crumbling remains of that wall, and it will seem obvious that the Iron Curtain has fallen too. But tonight, there is work to be done here in this room. Historians are gathered. For decades, they have been dissecting the rise of Hitler and the Nazis. Was he simply a megalomaniac who seized control of a nation and dragged it into war and genocide? Or was he a symptom of something more, a product of Germany's defeat in the First World War, its economic troubles in the 1930s, its flirtation with fascism, its yearning for an aggressive nationalism that would overcome internal divisions, and its shockingly rapid embrace of This question, which seems unanswerable, is actually the point. Each new generation of historians has kept Hitler's era alive by arguing about it, by searching for the decisive factor that made genocide seem inevitable in 1941 and asking why ordinary Germans went along with it. Did economic depression push them into Hitler's arms, or did was it weakness, or was it strength that brought down the Third Republic? Was it the masses, or was it the master race? Does it matter? Historians will continue to pore over these questions, but right now, there is work to be done here in this room. You spend hours poring over volumes that analyze every aspect of Nazi rule, the subtle ways that Nazi propagandists honed mass psychology, the shock of D-Day, the deceptions of Kristallnacht, the effects of Hitler's lengthening shadow. Outside the conference room, at conferences in Munich and Oxford, scholars argue about structural versus individual explanations for the Holocaust. Some say economic depression pushed Germans into Hitler's arms. Others insist that centuries-old anti-Semitism was decisive. But then some argued that without Hitler, it wouldn't have happened. And still others claim that the Holocaust would have happened with or without Hitler. You know what else they discuss here in this room? Denial? It's the stuff of nightmares. In 1978, you read about Ernst Zindel's pamphlets denying the Holocaust. Now, in the 90s, you hear about skinhead marshes in Berlin and Copenhagen. Suddenly, old fears are Was it all just a bad dream? Is history repeating itself? Is it happening again? It feels as though you are living through the 1930s once more. Leaders across Europe pass hate speech laws. Non-government organizations launch massive educational campaigns. You watch a trial prosecuting denial as a crime. Each conviction feels like a victory, but also like a defeat because hatred has proven able to survive so long. On January 27th, you join government officials and survivors at memorial events for International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Political leaders speak of the dangers of indifference and the importance of remembrance. Survivors bear witness to the enduring power of hope. Together, they lay a wreath at a Berlin memorial. They recall the ghettos, the deportations, the gas chambers, the crematoria, the death. They remember all those who perished. Then you step outside to see the extremists are shouting, chanting, slogans, waving their flags. Their signs proclaim, "Stop the Lügen, stop the lies." You know that no matter how many memorials you build, no matter how many speeches you make, vigilance is never optional. In the 21st century, you realize that the battle over memory has moved to the internet. Online hate groups use social media algorithms to find new recruits. Misinformation spreads through podcasts and private chat rooms. But survivors' testimonies now stream in dozens of languages. Virtual tours of concentration camps bring the history to classrooms that are thousands of miles from Europe. Here in this room, you listen as a granddaughter of Auschwitz survivors warns against complacency. When freedom becomes mere convenience, she says, tyranny regains strength. You know that it is up to you, the next generation, to keep the flame of remembrance alive. This is a story about fear. Fear of losing what you have, of never having enough, and of being replaced by people who are different from you. It's a story about anger. Anger at those who benefit from the status quo. Anger at those who take your vote for granted. And anger at those who make your life difficult because they are different from you. It's a story about scapegoating. Scapegoating those who are different from you. Scapegoating those who have less power than you, and scapegoating those who make you feel powerless. We live in an age of populist movements and authoritarian leaders who call for restoring their country's greatness and for punishing those who have failed them. We live in an age of dog whistles and fake news, of echo chambers and political correctness. We live in an age of identity politics and online outrage. And we live in an age of people who feel left behind and forgotten. But it wasn't always like this. The world has changed since the 90s, not just in technology and culture, but also in our understanding of ourselves and our responsibilities to each other. But the fundamental vulnerabilities that Hitler exploited in the 1930s still resonate today. The fears, the economic anxiety, the scapegoating, the anger, all of it still resonates today. From the pastel Austrian villages where Hitler was born to the chimneys of Auschwitz, where so many perished, Hitler's trajectory was a steady march towards horror. His personal grievances gave way to ideological fervor, which found fertile ground in the institutional decay of Weimar Germany. The rest is a horrific lesson in propaganda, in the abuse of power, in the seduction of totalitarianism. Today, we live in a post-truth world where feelings and beliefs take precedence over facts and evidence. Today, we live in a world where respect and empathy have been replaced by outrage and condemnation. Today, we live in a world where difference is demonized and diversity is divisive. But let us remember, we also live in a world where there is more good than bad, where there is more hope than despair, and where there are more people who stand up for what is right than those who stand by and watch it happen. Let us also remember that while hate speech may be protected by the First Amendment, it does not give us the right to ignore the hate speech, or worse, to normalize it. As you rise from this journey, carry with you the lessons etched in stone and ink, in monuments and memoirs. Remember that education and empathy are the antidote to hate. Remember that our differences do not define us, but our common humanity does. Remember that we are all responsible for the actions of our government, and that we must hold our leaders accountable when they abuse their power. Remember that courage is contagious, and that one person's act of kindness can make a world of difference. Above all, remember that never again is not just a slogan, it's a commitment to ourselves, to our future, and to the memory of those who suffered and perished in the past. Thank you.